Today I'm going to show you how to pair some Dollar Tree items with craft items and transform them into high-end decor. Welcome to the Chic Show. This beautiful frame inspired me to create my own using a Dollar Tree frame. You can see I already started another project, but I'm actually going to be changing that. Those molds that you see on there I'm actually going to pull off, but the frame itself is from Dollar Tree. I saw them around Mother's Day, and I'm using some of this gold leaf paint to paint the entire frame. As I said, I did remove those molds because I decided to try and make this frame instead. So I'll save those molds for another time. This is IOD's trimmings mold, and I'm going to be dusting it with cornstarch, and then I'm using some paper clay to put into this mold, and then I'm going to mold it around my frame. I just rolled my clay into kind of a snake, and then I fit it in there and then just rubbed away the excess. These molds do have a little rim on it, so it's easy to push that excess clay out. Once I've removed that excess clay, I'm just going to flip it over and let gravity help that clay fall out. And you can see I do have some extra clay there, but I'm just going to use an X-Acto knife to trim that away. Now I'm just going to add that clay onto my frame and kind of mold it to the shape so that it can start drying in that shape. And then I'll go ahead and work on the second piece. Now the good thing about these IOD molds is they fit together perfectly. They're made so that you can make a really long piece if you need to. They fit together perfectly. Now down here at the end, I did have to pivot just a little bit. So I'm going to be curving that mold or that clay around on both sides so that it will meet in the middle. I did need to add a small piece here, so I just attached that as I'm showing you here, and then I will continue to mold that around that frame. Now you can glue this while it's wet, which I probably should have done, but I decided to let it dry for a little while before I started to mess with it. So I'm just using Titebond's Quick and Thick to attach my molds to my frame. Now there are some gaps there, but I think once I get it painted, they won't show quite as bad, but keep that in mind. It's probably best to paint your clay while it's wet so that it doesn't shrink when it dries. I started out using some of Rub 'n Buff's Antique Gold for this frame, but I did change that. I decided I wanted it a little bit brighter gold, so I'm using some of this liquid gold, and I'm just using a small brush to try and get in all of those nooks and crannies. I also went back with some of that Rub 'n Buff on a chip brush and kind of went over places that I thought were a little too bright. I love these little trinket trays from Mark and Graham, and I decided that I could use something from Dollar Tree and something I had at home in my stash to create something similar. These little wood trays I saw at Dollar Tree back around Mother's Day, but they did not last long. I'm using Kissing Booth in DIY paint to paint the entire tray front and back, top and bottom. Because this wood was so dry, I did spritz it with a little bit of water before I started painting. I did give this 2 coats because it did just soak up that paint. Instead of making it a monogram, I decided to use this metal fleur-de-lis that I had pulled off of another picture frame. And I'm using some gold rub and buff on that. Now I'm going to use some Tite Bond and I'm going to glue that to the center of my tray. I really should have waited until after the next step to do this, but I wasn't sure how the glue would adhere if I had done that. So here I have glued it in place, and if you remember on the original piece, it was kind of a shiny lacquer, but this of course is flat, so I'm using some Quick and Thick that's really shiny. I really like it for certain projects, and I'm going to go over the entire wood part of the frame. Also, just to note, DIY paint is a clay-based paint, so it does need to be sealed. Otherwise, it can be reactivated if it gets wet. So I did seal this, of course, with this triple thick. And you can see how the color comes to life once it's sealed. And here's a look at the final project. When I saw this tray on Paragold's website, I knew I had to make it. I'm using this metal tray from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to take it outside and give it a coat of flat white spray paint. Now this Very Hungry Caterpillar calendar is from 2023 from Dollar Tree, and I couldn't help but pick it up when I saw it. Now I apologize, I don't know why this part is blurry, but I simply picked out the caterpillar that fit the tray the best, and I'm just going to use some Mod Podge and Mod Podge that onto the tray. I also added a coat of Mod Podge to the entire top of the tray, and then I used some stamps and a red ink pad to stamp the words. This mold is from IOD's Spring Release, and I'm going to be using that for this project. I'm also going to be using one of these wood plaques from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to give it a coat of black chalk paint. I used resin for the mold, and once I have that hardened, I'm going to give it a coat of the same black chalk paint. Once the paint has dried, I'm going to be using this little brush. It's actually a makeup brush from Dollar Tree, and some gold rub and buff, and I'm just going to rub that gently over the dog that I chose to use. And I'm not going to get in all of the nooks and crannies. I want some of that black to show all the details. I thought this looked a little bit plain, so I decided to use a little bit of rub and buff along the edges of the wood plaque. Now I'm going to richen up the tone of that black color using some black wax. I also used the black wax to kind of tone down the gold around the edges. I used a paper towel to go back and wipe away any excess wax before I moved on to the next step. Lost some footage of the next step, of course, but I used some of the etiquette stamps from IOD's Summer Release, and I used a white ink pad just to stamp around the dog. I really like the dark and moody academia look that this piece gives off. I hope you've enjoyed these Dollar Tree items turned into high-end decor. If you want to watch another video, here's a suggestion right here. Thanks for watching. Remember to share the chic. Bye now.